The Witch's Curse. Once upon a time, in a secluded village hidden deep within a vast forest, there lived an old woman named Eliza. Her skin was weathered and leathery from years of exposure to the harsh winds and bitter winters. Her gray hair fell in tangled locks around her hunched shoulders, and her eyes, sunken and dull, seemed to carry a darkness that made the villagers uneasy. Eliza lived in a decaying cottage at the edge of the forest, far from the others in the village. People rarely spoke to her, for there were rumors that she practiced witchcraft. Some said she had lived for centuries, kept alive by dark magic, while others believed she had made a pact with the devil himself. No one knew for sure, but they all agreed that Eliza's son, Thomas, was as strange as his mother. He was a quiet man, his eyes full of sorrow, and he never left his mother's side. It was said that his life had been a miserable one, overshadowed by the sinister presence of Elijah. He had never married, never had children. He worked as a blacksmith in the village, but always kept to himself, as if afraid to get too close to anyone. People whispered that he was cursed, just like his mother. One cold winter evening, Thomas returned to his cottage after a long day's work. He felt a heavy weight in his chest, an ominous sense of dread that had been gnawing at him for weeks. As he entered the dark, damp cottage, the faint smell of something rotten filled his nostrils. His heart quickened, and he called out for his mother. "Mother?" he asked, his voice trembling. The cottage was eerily silent, save for the crackling of the fireplace. Thomas stepped deeper into the house, moving cautiously as he searched for her. When he reached her room, he found her sitting in a rocking chair, staring out the window with an unsettling stillness. "Eliza?" he asked again, stepping closer. She turned slowly, her face creased with age, her eyes vacant. "You've been away for too long, Thomas. You must stay with me always," she whispered in a rasping voice. A chill ran down his spine, but he forced himself to smile. "I'm here now, Mother. I'll always be here for you." She gave him a strange, knowing smile, her lips curling upward in a way that made his stomach churn. "That's good, my son. You are all I have left." That night, after Thomas had gone to bed, the strange feeling of dread settled over him like a heavy blanket. He couldn't shake the thought that something terrible was about to happen. He lay there, wide awake, listening to the faint sound of creaking wood and the wind howling outside. Suddenly, the air grew cold, and the room was filled with an unsettling presence. The door to his room slowly creaked open, and there, standing in the doorway, was his mother. Her pale skin gleamed in the moonlight, and her eyes glowed an unnatural shade of red. Her voice was barely a whisper as she spoke. "It's time, Thomas. Time for you to understand the truth." Before he could speak, Eliza's hands shot out and grasped him by the shoulders, her fingers cold as ice. "I have kept you safe all these years, but the time has come for you to fulfill your destiny." The room spun around him, and he felt as though his soul was being ripped from his body. He tried to scream, but no sound came. Eliza's eyes locked onto his, and a dark, malevolent force surged through him, filling him with an overwhelming sense of fear. Suddenly, he was no longer in his bed. He found himself in a vast, desolate landscape, surrounded by shadows and fog. A figure appeared before him, an ancient creature with glowing red eyes and a twisted grin. "You belong to her now," the figure hissed, its voice like the wind howling through the trees. "She has bound you to this place, and now you are hers forever." Thomas struggled to break free, but no matter how hard he fought, he couldn't escape. His mother's voice echoed in his mind, a constant whisper that grew louder and louder. "You are mine, Thomas. Always and forever." When he finally awoke, gasping for air, he found himself back in his bed, drenched in sweat. His mother stood at the foot of his bed, her eyes still glowing red. "It's time to fulfill your purpose, my son," she said, her voice sweet and cruel all at once. The curse has been passed down through generations, and now it's your turn to carry it. In that moment, Thomas realized the horrifying truth. His mother had not just practiced witchcraft, she was a witch. And he, her son, had been cursed from the moment of his birth to serve her in whatever dark ritual she required. The next morning, the villagers woke to find the cottage abandoned, the air thick with a sense of impending doom. The ground around the house was scorched, and the trees in the forest seemed to be withering, their leaves blackened and dying. No one ever saw Thomas or Eliza again, though some claimed to hear strange whispers on the wind, voices calling out in desperation.
The old woman and her son had vanished, leaving behind only a dark, lingering curse on the village. It was said that anyone who ventured too close to the abandoned cottage would be haunted by the same dark presence that had consumed them. And so, the legend of the witch and her son lived on, a tale of horror that haunted the villagers for generations. This story plays on the idea of a dark, twisted bond between a mother and her son, where her sinister influence drags him into her cursed world, leaving both of them to suffer the consequences of dark magic and an unbreakable fag.